All right. So, feet together. Let's take a bow. And so, let's do a quick warm up so we have time to spend on looking at the last bit of the 13 postures. So, feet parallel, knees bent, hips tucked, spine nice and vertical. And bend forward. Straighten the legs. Roll down. Keep breathing, relaxing neck and shoulders. And come back up. Hands on kidneys, lean back. And back to center. Knees back. And again. Straighten the legs. Come back up. Hands on kidneys, lean back. And back to center. And again. And come back up. Kidneys, lean back. And back to center. And going side to side. Back to center. And lean back. And back to center. Now carry the tiger. Stretch. Open the chest. And again. Rotating the shoulders. Heels on the ground. Oh. hold. And drop. Hold. So play the pipa. From here, shift. Turn. Forehead to the knee. Hold. Come back. Hold. Bring the toes forward. Turn. Hold. Hold. Back to center. Horse stance. And squat. Push the knees apart. And squat. Toes down. And shift. And shift. Toes up. And shift. And back to center. And walk the feet in. All right. So we're going to take a look at the final half of the last third of the 13 postures. All right. So Let's walk through the 13 postures so that we know where we are. All right, so we're just going to walk through it, and I'll talk through the direction. So if we start feet together, toes together, that's our front. And sitting down, step, rise up, sit, raise the arms, and sit. So, shift to the right, bring the left toes to the diagonal, turn, and facing the side cardinal, rise up, sit down, step out, ward off, grasp the sparrow's tail, press, and seal it closed. Shifting back, dropping the elbows and pushing. And then sitting down on left leg, bring the right toes to the other diagonal, the front diagonal, shift the weight, now left hand, left toe, swings in, sit down, step out, ward off, grasp the sparrow's tail, press, seal it closed, dropping the elbows, stepping, so we're going fast here, and push. Now bring the toes facing the front diagonal, shift, rise up, sit down, and ward off. Grasp the sparrow's tail. Press, seal it closed, shift back, push. Now 180 degree turn, bring the right toes, so all my weight's on the left, right toes to the rear diagonal, and stand up. Sit, step out, ward off, grasp the sparrow's tail, and press, and seal it closed, half step forward, shift back, sit down, open the hands, and push. And now, second section, dropping the hands, bring the toes to the rear diagonal, shift, slide the right foot forward towards the cardinal, and drag down, stand up, look back for brush knee, big step slightly to the side, brush your knee, twist, and shift forward. Play the pipa, push, and now sit down, bring the right toes facing the diagonal, the rear diagonal, we're now sitting to the cardinal, and drag down. And stand up, circle the hands, brush knee, big step, twist, push, play the people. And again, sitting down on the right leg, bring the toes to the diagonal, shift, face the rear cardinal, and drag down. And stand up, brush knee. And step to the side, play the people. And now 180 degree turn, so the right toes go to the diagonal, shift, face the front cardinal, and drag down. And play the, brush knee. And play the people. So now, third section, bring the left toes to the cardinal, shift, face the diagonal, and drag down, step through, twist the joint, step through, elbow strike, shoulder strike in the same breath, sit back, turning the hips, coming into ward-off position, shift the weight forward, rising up on the right leg, right hand is up until the hand is over the head. All right, so that's where we stop. So we're here, and we're going to step back onto the left foot and sit on the left foot into ward-off. Then big circle step and rise up onto the right leg into rollback. And then sit. Take another big circular step, sit back, drop the elbows, push, and then press. Right, so the one thing which is slightly different and weird with this particular segment is that so after shoulder strike, so this is exhale, ho. Then we come here, inhale, shi, then ho. So the first step back here is an inhale. So we're doing ward off on an inhale, right? Which is not what we'd usually expect. You'd think that ward off, ho, is an exhale, but here we're doing ward off on an inhale, shi, roll back, ho, on an exhale, right? So the breathing is slightly reversed in a way from the expectations. Part of it is to show that the movements are independent of the breath, in the sense that the logic of the movement is what prevails. The breath is there to support it, right? So it's not, we're not led by the breath. The breath gives us the tempo, but we have control over the breath, and we see this especially actually with elbow strike and then shoulder strike, right? It's a half breath. This is ho, ho, right? So we're adding, there's a move within the exhale. So that's important because sometimes we get stuck thinking the breath tells you what to do or how fast to go, and that's not the case. The breath is there to support the movement. What's important is the intent, the yi, right? The intent is what guides everything, because the intent is also what's going to guide the chi and the energy movement. So you don't want to be a slave to the breath. The breath is going to change. So this is ho, ho, and here this is inhale, shi, ward off. Exhale, ho, roll back.
I think for me right now, or historically, I would say I'm kind of a slave to breath.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
For a lot of people, we're taught so much to follow the breath and to think about the breath and all that we think that the breath becomes the dominant thing, but actually it can't be. It shouldn't be. Because the breath is going to change. I mean, hopefully your breath is going to get deeper and longer the more you do this and the more you practice breathing longer. So you don't want to get stuck where the only parameter that you can follow is the breath. Right? At the very beginning of the 13 postures, grasp the sparrow's tail, is this insanely long inhale. Right? So if you were to do it correctly, it's a ward off, ha, and then it's shi, ha. So already we're seeing there at the very beginning that the breath is being altered. We're forcing a long inhale, right? There's two reasons, right?
I don't necessarily think my form is so much a slave to it as is historically my energy has been.
Yeah.
I've learned
so this
strong in energy.
Yeah. So there's an important thing here in terms of the connection between the breath and the energy, because there is a connection, right? Chi, in one of its interpretation, is literally air, it's breath, right? So there's a connection. There's a symbolic connection in the sense that, in the same way that air is moving up and down, as you fill the lungs and exhale and come out. That's the feeling that is then going to be associated with the movement of chi throughout the body. So there's a connection between breath and chi. The thing is, it's not one directional, which is why you have certain breathing patterns that you find in meditations where, on purpose, for example, you would hold your breath. So you do like an inhale on 4, hold for 2, exhale on 4, or inhale 3, hold for 4, exhale 7, or something like that. So all these different patterns that you can have, because that's a way of using the breath, of controlling the breath in order to generate chi. So there's definitely a connection between the two. The very first move here in grasp the sparrow's tail with that long inhale, right, has two functions. One of them is to let us know that this move here is supposed to happen in one breath, which means that it's not a movement that is just, right, that takes a while. It's a movement that should actually be very fast. And the application of grasp the sparrow's tail would be like this, right? It's a single breath, connect. catch and throw. Catch and throw. You would never go all the way back here and then all the way here when actually doing the application of it. It'd be very fast, right? So it's a fast kind of whip-like throw of the opponent's fist to the side. So the breath, the fact that it's such a long breath in the form gives us a hint that this is where we're expanding time. The other thing that it does is that inhale, you're bringing everything into the dantian, you're supercharging the dantian at the very beginning of the form, of doing the form, right? Even followed by a press. Press is here, right? It's not over there projecting the energy out. Press is here, everything is contained. So you've started the 13 postures by supercharging the dantian because there's a forced breath. So it's not that there's no connection between the breath and the movement and the chi. It's just that we can play with them. It's not, the breath doesn't control everything. We can play with how the breath is engaged and done, right?
If just starting to realize that and begin to separate it.
Yep.
So this is good timing.
Yeah. So because for example, if you were to do the moves very, very slowly because you just want to focus on the feeling, either the feeling of moving energy or the feeling of the moving body. Like, so for example, very simple, just rising up and pushing. If you want to spend the time really focusing on how like the pressure on the foot transmitted through the ankle, the knee, the thigh, the hips, and the back, you want to give yourself time for those feelings and not be forced by your breath to do them quickly. So it's possible to go through the entire form and do it at double breath. So taking 2 breaths, right? So ho and shi, ho. And it's not really cheating. It's just that you're focusing on something different, right? You're not locked into all of these. There are different components that are integrated with each other, but they're not controlling each other. You can do them independently. And this is what the 13 postures shows us, that you can have a double breath. Ho, ho. You can have projection of energy on an inhale. Ho. This is shi on the word off. They're not fixed. They're connected, but they're not fixed. So depending on what you want to do, you can change them, you can play with them based on what the need is at the moment. That's very important because otherwise, you get lost. You just follow the breath, and all you do is letting an automatic function guide you instead of having your mind starting to be in charge of the automatic functions. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and where it for me, until just recently realizing, is limiting my energy usage and control because it was fixed
to the breath. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if everything that you do is fixed to the breath, then the breath is the commander instead of the intent. And we have in the Tai Chi classics that the chi follows the intent, right? Chi follows yi. So it shows that the intent is actually the primordial and the most important aspect of all of this. Not the breath, not even the chi, it's the intent. Because the intent is what's going to move the chi everywhere. And the breath is going to support all of that, right? So if you were to do, and actually if you practice push hands, it's an experience that you can often have where you can be pushing and then, right? You're caught where you're doing several things. You're deflecting, countering, pushing, and all of this is happening in a single breath. So you have defensive move, countering move, and pushing moves, all in a single breath. So literally what you're doing and the qualities of energy that you're expressing are not tied to the breath. They can all of that can happen within a single breath. Same thing as, this is in the form, grasp the sparrow's tail, roll back, push, come back to center, right? So that's in a single inhale. You have a roll back and you have a push in a single inhale. So 2 opposite qualities, right? In terms of yin and yang, they're opposite qualities, but they both happen within a single breath. So the breath is not dictating what you do; it's your intent. So that's an important thing. So from here, here we go. Inhale, and this is ward off. You're being pushed, ward off. The weight is 70-30, so that means, right, we're it's 70% on the rear leg, 30% on the front. Oh, you're sitting down, pushing back. Somebody is pushing, and you're basically brushing them away. And the step, just sitting back, and then big circular step, which brings us to rollback. All right. So we're here. We just sit straight back on the foot, and then big circular step, rising up for rollback. Rising up for rollback. And remember that from ward off, circular step, rise up. For rollback, we never want to go too far. Right? You never want to go too far to the side, because now you're just pushing yourself off. There's somebody coming towards you, so it's just enough for your hand to be on the other side of your face, if that makes sense. All right? Because your arm is nice and far and ahead of you, other hand is palm down. All right? So it's because you're rising up. You were here, circle step, so that the supporting leg, the left leg in this case, is bent, right? So that gives you a nice reach, shift, rise up, right? And this is the rollback right here, right this.
Yeah, I'm noticing. I originally learned this very L.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah.
The curve, notice the curve more.
Yeah.
That seems more functional.
Yeah. So, yeah, some people learn it here, and I think it's partially because in brush knee, one of the things that we do here is here, and we're actually told, it's like the hand is like a mirror in brush knee, and you're here, and then you look, and then you circle. The only difference is that in brush knee, the arm is right here. That's the only circle that it does, right? Whereas in rollback, we're actually going along the horizontal. This is along the vertical plane, right? This in brush knee, this is the vertical plane. In rollback, it's the horizontal plane. So this, doing it with the arm at an angle like an L, is very close to kind of like karate stances, right? Where you're doing these very hard blocks, and they're supposed to be blocks, right? Boom, somebody's hitting, and you're literally blocking, right? And you're blocking, and so you have this kind of strong force because you're blocking an impact. Rollback is not that at all, right? There is no blocking in rollback. So what you're trying to do is to actually reach as far out as possible, and notice the hand turns. So you're drawing in. Rollback is, whoa, drawing. You're deflecting to over there. There should be no impact, right? You're just, something is coming towards you, and you just roll it so that...
Tension and attachment to.
Yeah. There's no blocking. If all goes well, goes against that wall back there, right? It's almost like if somebody were to shoot a very slow arrow at you, what you want to do is not block it. What you want to do is just deflect it so it still goes to the back wall, but now it just missed you by a few inches. So all you're doing is this. Right?
And let their energy continue.
And the energy, exactly, you're not stopping the energy, you're just redirecting it. You want the energy to go slightly differently than where it was going, but it's still going right through. So that's why you don't want to go here. If you're going all the way to the side, you're pushing against the incoming energy. That's ward off. Right? Ward off is that push, that moving out of the way. Rollback is, no, you're just shifting them so they still go back there, but without stopping the energy. Which is what is that rolling, that turning of the hand is actually important because it turns the forearm into a rolling pin.
Yeah.
Right? You should feel like it's almost a drawing in. Right?
All of these contain the blocking type of stuff, but it's less rigid, I think, because we're adding rotation
Exactly.
to do the work rather than force work.
Yeah, it's not blocking energies. And the other thing is, when you think of blocking here or here, like karate stance, right? You're using the forearm, and the forearm is impacting the other guy's forearm, right? So in a way, you're blocking at the point of impact. With rollback, you kind of want to have that sense of throwing the arm out as far as it goes. So for two reasons. One of them is just structural, like in terms of doing the form, the shoulders open, the elbows open, right? The whole arm is relaxed and lengthened, because that's just in terms of health, in terms of doing it in a relaxed way. You want every joint that's involved to be as open and long as possible. So the arm is extended. If you're here, right, there's tension right here because, my elbow is not fully extended. It's not open. My elbow is closed. And you can see that actually just by doing that, my shoulder is also tight, because in terms of, right, because I've shortened the muscles in the arm, so all the muscles here are also engaged, and it's more difficult, as opposed to here, where I can feel that my entire shoulder is now lengthened. So I'm going to go here just in terms of structure and flow of blood and energy. The other thing is,
and using that extended all the way, you get that whip, heavy, elastic
that's
quality.
right. Exactly. The arm is like a whip instead of being a block. The other thing, though, is that what you're going for is the other guy's shoulder. And that's, right, because if I'm going to go here, there's contact somewhere along my arm. And then the minute there's contact, I go like this. Right? And this like almost like a scooping motion. And that's where the deflection is. And it means that it doesn't matter where the contact is made, because from our training in Tai Chi and push hands, we don't have to look. We can, even with the eyes closed, you throw the arm out, there's contact somewhere along the arm, and then you do rollback. The rollback can be done with any part of the arm, right? So it's not that you're doing rollback necessarily with the forearm. It could be your elbow. It could be your arm. And again, if anybody has experience in push hands, you know that you can, right? There's movements you can do where you're using the top of your arm to move an arm out of the way. There's no contact with the forearm. It's all the arm or even the shoulder. There's a hand here pushing to get out of it. I can do this, right? Using my arm and shoulder. That's a rollback. So a rollback is not about using the forearm or the hand to deflect. It's about using the entire arm. So if I go like this, and there's contact, even if I'm being pushed and I throw the arm out, even if the contact is here, I can still do rollback. If it's here, I do rollback. I have more control the further out it is, but the entire arm can be used. So when you do this,
Select waist turn.
This is a block with the forearm. Yeah, this is a block with the forearm.
And just the radius of the circle, just whether it's out on the outside of the circle or on the inside of the circle.
Exactly. It's not, this is just the shoulder moving. This, right? You have the whole, like you're saying, it's the whole radius of the arm that's moving through space. Yeah, whole body's moving. Even if you don't step, just doing this, right? Because the movement is coming from the waist, you can see the shoulders are actually now turning, so you're removing the body from the point of impact. As opposed to doing this, or this, or this, where the body is still there. Here we're going here. Boom. Boom. See, the body is pivoting with the arm, and so the deflection can even be here. This is also rollback. Right? I'm being pushed and I go like this, that's rollback. I don't need the arm to do a rollback. All right, so we were here. Step back, ward off. Ward off is pushing away an attack. It's still defensive, you're being pushed, and you're countering it with this push. Big circle, roll back. Then big circle, sit back. Drop the elbows and push, rising up and pushing. So here we see.
Do that again. I want to see the timing of this.
Yep. So from here, we were sitting down, roll back, big step, roll back, and as you sit back, you close the arms, then you drop the elbows, and then rise up and push. All right. So we're here, roll back, sit, rise up and push. Notice that essentially my right arm is basically staying in the same position relative to my body as when you were doing a rollback, right? Because rollback is here. So this arm is basically in this position right here. It's about chest high. When I step back, same exact position for the arm. So what's happening is I'm stepping back to square. And it's my front arm that then folds to join what was my rear arm. Right? So it's from here to here. And all it is that you've done a roll back, but the guy's really mean, so he's coming back and giving you another push. So you step back and you absorb that push, open the guy's arms, and then push back. Right? Here we see that we're actually not counting this particular move here, this, because what's important is the push. But the thing is, you can, in order to have a push, in order to generate energy, you have to receive energy, right? I mean, otherwise it's from here, it would be to here. That's, or receive energy, counter it, and return it. Right? Sit down, because you have to sit down in order to project energy. So it's this one little weird thing about most of the time when you see on or the push, it's paired with this particular move, right? And this technically is a rollback. Right? Technically, this is rollback energy because you're being pushed. You go back, drop the elbows.
So ducking into a void, and then it's like a loop.
Yeah, somebody's pushing you. It's like somebody gives you a two-handed push against your chest, so you absorb it, drop the elbows because the rising of the forearms is what pushes those two hands that are against your chest. That's what pushes them to the side. Then rise up and push. Right. So it's here. You can see how there's that bouncing energy. You receive, and then you push back.
Yeah, we used to do warm-up exercise.
Yeah, it's exactly like it's the which is one of the first push hands exercise, or number 3, I think. Right, just that getting in that bounce. So it's the exact same thing. So anyway, but that's what we're doing. So we're here, ward off on an inhale, roll back, and then push. All right. So here and then push, and again now we have that second double breath because now we're going to go press. All right. So we were here, double breath. So exhale.
Nice.
And then shift forward. Yeah, you shift forward and down.
Falling.
Right.
Sinking. Not falling.
Yeah.
Sinking.
And then And it's the that seated energy, like that's what you bring to the arms for the press. Because again, press is not far. You're not going as far as possible. Press is here. So that's why that sinking energy is right there. Boom. Right? Short. You're cracking a sternum. You're not going through something. You're just hitting the sternum, cracking. You're just trying to shake the person in front of you. And so here, again, we're rising up, pushing, shift the weight, sit. And there's that bringing in the hips so that the hips are square. So the rear foot travels a bit. Right? So we're here, and then toes come in slightly. And they come in because the hips are turning. Right? So it's here, and then I want my hips to come to square. So my feet, or my rear foot, is sliding in so that I can bring my hips to square. So it's not a step, it's more a matter of now I'm fully on that right foot, and in order to bring those hips forward, that foot needs to come behind. Right. And here again, we have the iron law of the diagonal, which means that so in this case, I'm sitting on the right foot, so it's going to be the left hand that's going to be full or dominant, which means that for the push, I'm going to turn that wrist because I'm hitting with the wrist, right? Bending the hand so that it's bent, right? Going from here to here, so I'm hitting with the wrist. Right leg, left wrist. And then I just support that wrist. Right?
Yeah.
The other hand is just supporting the wrist. So, but that's how you always, because since we do on all four diagonals or four directions, there's going to be a moment of going, uh-oh, now what do I do? You're like, I pushed, I shift forward. Which hand is it? It's always going to be the opposite of the hand of the foot. So if I'm on this leg, so I go, oh, which hand is it? It's going to be this one. If my weight is on this leg, this is the wrist. If I'm here, it's going to be here. Right?
That's how I try.
Yeah, that's always remember the laws of diagonals. And then you start seeing also some of the kind of the basic logic. And the cool thing is that it's exactly how boxing works. So we know that this is actually correct, right? Like an actual full-on boxing, if you're here, rise for that front, rise on the rear leg for the punch of the front hand, sit, turn the hips, right, for that punch. Rise, punch, rise, punch. It's exactly what you do in boxing. This idea of involving the hips, turning the hips, because that's what powers the punch, right? That's what powers the punch, is that turn of the waist, and that's where we pick up that heel on that rear foot, because it allows us to turn the waist. So it's not about the foot in the sense that it's about the waist. What do you need to do in order to get the waist moving and squared up, generating that rotation energy? So whether it's a boxing punch or press, right? Same thing. Sitting down, turning the waist, press. All right. So we know it's correct. We see it in boxing, and they know how to punch. All right. So it's the exact same thing. And again, double breath. All right. So the breath is not guiding you, your intent is. You're doing two things within the single breath. Turning the waist. That's the important part. And we'll see that all over the place, that turning, rising, turning. Getting the hips engaged in the movement of the hands. That's what determines it. And then basically that's it in terms of the 13 postures, because once you're here, right, then all you have to do, because your weight is fully on the front leg, all you have to do is then pick up that foot and step back. sit, and turn. And so, as always, let's see, when you're here, the foot, you pick up the foot. The foot is actually at an angle. The foot is always pointed to kind of at a diagonal. Part of that is simply body mechanics, right? Because the if your knees, when you're here and you bring the feet in, if your knees are kind of completely square, you're closing the hip joint. So your foot is actually pointed to the diagonal, which opens up the hip joint, right? So my foot and my knee and my hip are actually pointing to the diagonal. So even though I'm squaring up the hip, there's a slight opening of that hip joint because my hips are pointing this way, but my foot and knee are actually pointing slightly to the side. Not here where everything is pointing square, because you can feel that this is actually closing of the hip joint. There's a slight opening of the hip joint. So your rear foot.
Major difference between the public chin and chin form. Most wonky.
Yes, in the public, that's right. In the public style, everything is
on a rail.
Yeah, everything is very much square and linear. But the minute you start,
those folds
yeah,
at the same time, which always felt like.
That's right. The minute you start really focusing on the hips and thinking about the hips, you'll see how unnatural actually it is to bring everything in line, and that you're really closing the hips and it doesn't feel right. As opposed to simply doing this, slightly open in the hip joint, and suddenly everything is more solid and also more stable. Because if I'm here, because everything is closed, I don't have the same range of motion in my hips as opposed to here. It's a slight difference, but it makes a big difference in terms of stability. So the important
thing I notice is, like, if you step back in line, there's no way to rotate on either hip.
Yep.
If you step back,
this gives
45, now you've got flexibility in all directions. You can
exactly. You can turn. Also, what it does is it means that you're immediately ready to shift back onto that rear foot, and your rear foot is already at a diagonal and it's correctly placed. So one of the things you want to make sure you do is that every time you come here, your foot is pointed to the diagonal, so that if you shift back onto that foot, your alignment is correct. So there's a turn of the hips. So the hips are square, but the rear foot is not. The rear foot is actually to a diagonal.
Yeah, it seems like through the whole form, whichever is the unweighted foot is at the opposite of the other foot. So if the weighted foot is on the cardinal, the other is sort of...
That's going to be the rule at all times, right? The foot. So that's why it's important to keep in mind when we do the 13 postures. It's the training ground for everything else that happens later in the form. Having that mental image of the square, right, which is the 4 cardinal directions, and then the diagonals, which means there's only 8 places for your feet to go. And your foot is always going to be along one of those lines, and the relationship is always going to be one foot pointing front, the other foot is to the diagonal of that front foot. So all the transitions that we do is always, if I'm here and I want to go back, I'm going to bring my foot so that it's along the diagonal of the direction I want to point towards. So that's that relationship that we're always going to have. The front foot points in the direction of the intent, the rear foot points to the diagonal of that. So it's the same thing when we're here and we bring the foot in. My foot is actually aimed slightly to the diagonal, so that if I sit back, I'm in the proper position. So there's always the feet are rarely parallel, essentially. If they're ever parallel, it's because there's a trick that's happening. It's a sign actually that you're doing an ankle lock using your feet. We'll see that later in the form in the first one, where single whip is here and you bring the toes in so that your feet are parallel. But that's because you're locking the other guy's leg as you do something to him. As you pull that way, you've locked his foot. So otherwise, the feet always have this front and diagonal. So anyway, after press, simply step back, sit back, and now you're free to just simply turn and bring the foot to whatever diagonal or cardinal direction you need it to go to the second side, right? So if you get the feet position correct in press with that diagonal, and then you just simply step a little further back because you don't want to be close. See, this is too close now. I can't turn because my feet are too tight. So this is simply step back, shift. So you're just stepping back in order to give yourself space. Now you can shift, pick up the toes, and boom, now we're back and we can do the next step. So it's as simple as possible, right? If this is done correctly, just slide the foot, sit back, right? So get this position correct, and then you can just slide back. Right, nice and easy. All right, and that's the 13 postures. One last thing at the very end. Let's see, we end up. I don't think of which foot I'm on. At the very end, step back. Basically same thing. We're just going to come here, bring the foot to front, shift the weight to the left, and then the right foot comes in. So what that looks like, if I do it facing front, we simply come in. So we're press. We do the exact same thing as before. We step back, sit down, turn, bring the left foot until it faces front. So the front cardinal, shift. So my 100% here. Then right hand and right foot, draw in, cross the hands, right foot, right hand goes out. Carry the tiger. And then left foot comes in. All right.
Do you put your right hand or your left hand on top?
Right hand on top.
But
Right hand on top for men, actually, and left hand on top for women. There's variations, and it depends on exactly what you're doing, but essentially the right hand goes on top for men. Right, left hand goes on top for women. It's not a huge deal.
Yeah, off of press. In the 13 postures, it's always a step back for a turn.
It's always a step back before turn, and you can feel it because if I'm here and I just simply sit straight back, right? There's not enough space for me to really sit and then bring my toes in. Then I'm in this weird position. So you need that space. That's why you just slide the foot back, boom, and now you have space. So you always have that. You have those open hips.
Around.
Yeah.
Puts you in right distance on the opposite side too.
Yeah. So you need that space. I mean, the whole, you need the space to move. It's that happy spot, happy place where the length of your step is determined by your hips, right? But you also don't want to be so tight that then you can't rotate your feet and you're stepping on yourself and your waist is too cramped together to move, right? So it's closed off. So you want to have enough, feel like there's an opening of the waist, opening of the hips, and you can turn within that opening.
They let the step fall where the hip extension is. Is that the heel? And then you roll from there?
Yes, so the step is to the heel. Right? Though in the end, your foot is actually going to be flat. At the beginning, you want to think in terms of heel to toes to rise up and picking up the heel. All that is to force you to think about your foot, right? Heel to toes to picking up the heel. All of that is to force you to think about your foot. The reality is you will just place your foot flat on the ground. Because from there you can go in, like even if my foot is flat on the ground, I can push off my toes without picking up my heel. Picking up the heel is to remind me that that's where the pressure is on the toes. But I can do it with a flat foot, right? Because in the end, like if you're doing push-ins or stepping push-in, your foot is flat on the ground at all times. All right? And because you can have that pressure, heel or toe, without picking up the foot at all. So the step, you don't want to think too much in terms of, oh, I have to put my heel down. Think in terms of, I have to put my foot down. So it's slightly, because the danger is if you think in terms of heel, then it's possible to reach a little further with that heel.
Too far. Yeah.
And then when you put your foot down, you're actually pulling yourself forward. So you want to think in terms of
tension into the bottom of the leg.
So it's almost like you want the bubbling well is what you're putting down.
And you're massaging it.
Exactly. But it's really the center of the foot is what you're focusing on. Right? But at the beginning, you want to focus on that rolling, that full engagement of the foot, the rolling of the foot, and the clear placement of pressure either on the heel or on the toes, right? The fact that heel to toes, when we're pushing, the weight is on the toes or the front of the foot, because that's what's pushing us back. And when we turn, we're pivoting on the heel. But you can pivot on the heel with a flat foot. It's just the difference between pivoting on the heel and pivoting on the toes. It brings your foot in a completely different direction. So that's why we're at the beginning, we're being explicit as to which part of the foot we're rotating on. And then eventually it becomes second nature, and then you don't have to pick up anything. It can all be done with a flat foot. And in a way, it's you're kind of hiding which part of the foot has the weight. All right, so let's close this off. Let's do Celestial Tiger. Just to kind of get everything back in line, and get the energy back into the Dantian. So, Celestial Tiger. Remember, we're going to do this 3 times. So, basic posture. Hands down. Palms facing up. Pinkies out. Rounded arms, palms out. Pointing up. Along the vertical. Drop the arms, open the chest to the heavens. And reach back. Drop. Exhale with the hands across the heart. And again. And feet together. Finding the nice vertical. And let's take a bow. All right. So, hiddentaichi.com for to join the actual classes.